Why does the world need more midwives?
Oh, because we are experts on low-risk pregnancy and birth, which makes it really safe for the woman and the baby throughout pregnancy and birth. That's how we are trained, and that's our special skill.
Hi, my name is Augustine Colebrook, and I'm the principal at Midwifery Wisdom Collective. I speak on this podcast about big picture political issues and the future of our profession.
Hey y'all, I am Jamara, and I'm a midwife. I'm also a birth justice activist, and this season I am looking forward to sharing stories of Black midwives and the communities they serve.
Hello, beloved birth community. I'm Angela Love, nurse midwife since 2004, preceptor, and mother. I have a home birth practice called Midwife Love and a national telehealth practice called Midwife RX. My mission is to keep birth choices available and to educate the next generation of midwives for our daughters and grandchildren. Matriarchy now.
I'm Layla Wyatt. I get to share with you the voices of student midwives from across the country and beyond. This season, we focus on those students who just graduated, are about to sit for the NARM, or did yesterday, and we get tips and tricks for you for what happens at the end of the student midwife journey.
I'm your host, Augustine Colebrook. This episode, we take a wild trip to Sweden, and we get to speak to not one, but 3 experts. I'm so excited to introduce our first guest. Well, actually, let's let her do it because she's been introducing every episode so far.
Okay, hi, hello. I'm Erika Grönberg or Grönberg, and I live in Stockholm, Sweden. I am a midwife here, and I've been a midwife for 20 years. Currently, or for quite some years back, I've been working at a maternity ward here in Stockholm. But I have lived in England for a long time, and I actually did my nurse training in England, and that's why I have this sort of half British accent.
Yeah, I hear it. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you knew this, but I lived in Denmark for a year.
Oh, really? So you speak some Danish?
Snakke dansk, snakke svensk.
Snackar du dansk? Nej.
Ulligt.
Ja, men det är fantastiskt. Gud vad roligt. That's great. I didn't know. Did you practice as a midwife in Denmark as well, or?
I didn't. I studied a bit, but I never was catching babies. I was 18, so I was still in school.
So how long have you been a midwife? Can I ask you?
Yeah, I've been a midwife for 20 years.
Well, that's the same as me then.
I love it. I thought that might be the case.
Yeah,
and
so for a long time, but like I said, I haven't practiced on the labor ward for a while, or for quite some time. I do the maternity bit, mostly. So, but that might be interesting to hear about as well, how we do go about things over here as well. Over here, as you might know, because of the US with the new abortion laws that are going to be, I don't know if they've implied them yet. Because of that debate, the debate is in the US, the debate is going on here as well. And we are very, very sort of worried about that it might influence people over here, what's going on in the US. So I'd like to hear some more about that at some other time, perhaps, but
Well, that is the problem, isn't it? The US has so much influence, and and with its current politics, it is potentially negatively impacting lots of places in the world. I've heard that from several of the callers. So it's quite fascinating. This is what I'm loving about this venture already, is that we have midwives with different accents and different paths to education and different practice environments all over the world. And yet they all say the same thing, which is really one of the most fascinating pieces of this project. In the US, oftentimes a midwife takes care of a client all the way through, and that's not quite the case where you are, right?
Well, we have that too. It's called like caseload midwifery, we call it, where you are actually having somebody where you follow your pregnant woman all the way through to labor ward basically, and also the aftercare. But I work at a maternity ward where you look after the pregnant woman throughout, and then in Stockholm we have like 5 big major hospitals where the woman then go to have her baby, and you don't see the same midwife. But we have also like a current project in Stockholm, something called caseload midwifery, which is also where basically I think it's still a project, and we're going to perhaps implement it so that you can choose whether you can do the caseload midwifery or go to a maternity ward where you have caseloads midwifery, or you can choose the more traditional one where I'm working.
So that would be the pregnant mother could choose which path she wants.
Yes.
Got
So
you.
yeah. So basically what you do is that where I work, it's like the national health, where I work at a clinic which is only perhaps, it is only midwife run. It's only midwives that are working there, and we do have doctors coming in maybe once or twice a week. If there's something special, we sign them on to this doctor's appointment. But apart from that, it's only midwives that are looking after the pregnant, straightforward pregnancy.
And will you tell us a bit, is that true? Is that pretty normal in Sweden, that
Yes.
there are a lot of midwifery run clinics?
Yes.
Do you know the proportion?
That's like the 99% of them.
Wow.
And even with the caseload midwifery, it's still midwives running it. So the doctors, midwifery in Sweden is like a profession in its own right. So we don't stand, to answer to doctors. We are trained to look after this sort of straightforward pregnancy and birth, and anything that deviates from that you call a obstetrician or a gynecologist in. So the pregnant woman don't necessarily have to meet a doctor or an obstetrician unless there's something that is, needs attention from a doctor.
And so there's this great push in many parts of the world to make midwifery the gold standard, where the woman, when she becomes pregnant, she first sees a midwife, and it's the midwife who risks assess the woman and determines who she's appropriate care.
Yeah,
and that's what happens
you
in Sweden.
Explained
right?
it much better than me, but that's exactly how it is. So we assess the pregnancy. We make like a sort of thorough background of the woman's health and, throughout the pregnancy, basically. And then, like I said, if there's something that needs more medical attention, then it's up to the midwife to actually make that call, so to speak.
And it's quite fantastic because, Sweden, along with the rest of the Scandinavian nations, has been in the top 5 of the World Health Organization's best outcomes for several decades. And I think this is one of the reasons, is that the primary care falls to midwives.
Yeah, I think you're right. What matters is, I think, which is very good in Sweden, is that what you were saying is that it is actually midwife run maternity clinics where you go, which I think is, and also on the labor ward. I mean, a midwife on the labor ward is not under a doctor. She is only, or the obstetrician, she's assessing the straightforward birth. And like I said, if it deviates, then the other medical professions are called. Yeah.
Brilliant. It's a brilliant model. I was just talking about this with another caller, actually. This one, I think from Guatemala, I can't remember exactly, but we were talking about how the quality of decision making around risk status, when it's made by an expert in normal, is very different than when it's made by an expert in surgery. Yeah,
I can see that. Yeah.
And that's why the Sweden model has been so fantastic and trying to be replicated around the world, because it is so effective. Statistics included.
Yeah. And also, carry on. Next question.
No, you got it. Well, so one question: do caseload midwives ever deliver in birth center in home birth in Sweden?
No, they don't. They follow the I think perhaps what they're leaning to, that this is just a model like it used to be, you know, like in the 50s and 60s and 70s, you know, they had caseload midwifery, and then everything turned, so you had to go to hospitals to have your baby basically, and the women who wanted to have home births, they had to apply for it, and it's still like that. You have to apply to have it assessed and then to like granted, so it doesn't cost you a lot of money. Because
so
like
your insurance, so explain that to me. The insurance company requires the assessment?
No, it's like this, you know, it doesn't cost you. The Swedish a Swedish citizen don't have to pay to give birth in Sweden. It's all covered by our tax paying. Do you understand? So you don't pay via an insurance or anything like that. It's your tax money that pays for your birth. And the idea is that everyone has the right to the same amount of care when you give birth. So you can't pay your way to have a sort of better birth, or it doesn't go through an insurance company. It goes through your tax paying money. Nothing costs. It's free. The maternity clinic is free, and also the labor is free. And it's not like you can decide for the woman. You can only advise her, whether it's, you know, if you think that it hasn't been a straightforward pregnancy, or it hasn't been, the woman is free to choose this. However, there isn't a lot of midwives that practice home births. You have to be quite specialized or are willing to do the home births, because there's been quite a lot of controversy around it during the years. It's getting better, and this discussion is coming up again. But in Sweden, we don't have a lot of women choosing home births. Most women choose to have their babies in the hospital, and perhaps also because it's not a sort of thing. It's not like, we bring it up and say, what do you want? Do you want to have a home birth, or do you want to go to hospital to have it? It's not like that. Most women still go to hospital. But at the hospitals and the clinics, then it's only midwives to assess it at first. I mean, there's doctors around and obstetricians around, but it's the midwife who assesses the labor.
Right. And so are there clinics or birth centers outside the hospital, or is it all in large hospitals?
Large hospitals.
And how about rurally, even in the rural communities in Sweden?
You still go to hospital to have birth. And of course, it's much more common that people choose to have their babies if you live like 100 miles from the nearest hospital. So they have a different approach to it. But they do recommend most women to still have their babies in the hospital. And they sort of plan for it, you know, in between. I know it's not the same in England, for instance, where they have birth centers and midwife-run birth centers and so on. But in Sweden, it's not like that. So
but also in Sweden, the hospitals are not like hospitals around the rest of the world. It's almost like there are many birth centers inside the hospital because it's midwifery run, and they don't require So will you tell us about what a typical hospital ward is like in Sweden?
When the woman starts her labor, she has probably, if it's been a straightforward pregnancy, then she's been to the midwives perhaps 10 or 12 times during her pregnancy. She has, I know in the States you do much more ultrasounds. We only do 1 or 2 ultrasounds. It's called a routine ultrasound or a CUB ultrasound. And it's all voluntary. You can choose not to do any of them if you don't want to. And it's not like we recommend, you need to do this ultrasound and so forth. So when the woman is in labor, she's if it's her first baby, she's usually has attended together with her partner to like a labor preparation class. When she's due and she's at home, she phones the hospital.
So my name is Åsa Holstein, and I'm a Swedish midwife, and I am presently living in Stockholm, Sweden. And I've been working as a midwife since 2005.
Awesome.
Mainly with births at a big hospital here in Stockholm.
Yeah, so we've just learned with our previous interview, a friend of yours, I think, Erika Grönberg, yeah? You know her as well. We learned from her that Sweden has a very integrated midwifery, but has a very interesting process of not doing caseload midwifery. The midwives don't follow the person all the way through. Actually, midwives have different assignments in the care. So will you tell us a little more about that and what your role is?
So Sweden is a midwife-led country when it comes to pregnancy and birth, or low-risk pregnancy and birth. So right now I'm running my own company as an entrepreneur, and I have a company here in Stockholm that has lots of different courses for becoming parents, like Lamaze classes and prenatal yoga and infant CPR and first aid classes, lots of different classes for becoming parents or new parents. But I've been doing that for almost 10 years at this really, really big birth clinic in Stockholm that I think it's over 8,000 babies born there every year. So it's a little bit like a factory.
Oh my goodness. Well, so what we hear is that midwives either do prenatal care or clinic care, or they do birth care. Will you tell us a little more about how Sweden defines those?
So yeah, you can actually, as a midwife, we are trained to work in every field. And we also work with, what do you call it, anti-conception?
Like a birth control clinic.
Yeah. So we can work with that too. We are allowed to write out prescriptions for that. So that's part of our education. So you actually choose depending on what your interest is, I think. So for me, it's always been the interest in birth itself. But you can either work like with anti-conception care, or you can work with prenatal care in a clinic where you see the woman throughout pregnancy. Or you can work like I did, or I has done for many years, work in the actual birth clinic. So, but there is one place in Sweden right now, it's a project here in Stockholm. So there is a caseload project at one of the big Stockholm hospitals right now. And they're evaluating it, and it's turning out beautiful. So I hope that's going to be the standard care in Sweden 5 years from now.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about the history? Because Sweden has been one of those gold standard countries in the world that has maintained primary midwifery care through the ages. And I'm wondering, when did midwives in Stockholm stop doing caseload midwifery and start doing this very pieced out kind of care?
It was in the beginning of the 20th century, around 1920, that there was a big shift in healthcare around pregnancy and childbirth, and women started to give birth in hospitals instead of giving birth at home. So that's when the shifts happened in Sweden. So we've never had like a caseload program here in Sweden.
Certainly there was historically, before modern medicine, midwives were working in their own communities taking care of women.
Oh yes,
like around the world.
Yeah, it's been the same in Sweden until it started to be like popular to give birth in the hospitals.
Gotcha.
Then you didn't have the caseload system anymore. So
I see, but there's an experiment to bring it back. That's very exciting.
Yeah, because there is so much research going on that shows it's best for the woman and for the partner and for the process. So, and also for the midwives, I think it's a beautiful way to work.
Oh, I agree. Oh, that's so exciting. Well, so right now, given the current system, what does birth look like in a hospital in Sweden?
From what I've understood from the women I interview in my podcast that has given birth in the United States in hospital, it's very different. You can have a very home-like, you can have a almost birth center kind of birth in a big hospital in Sweden, even though you have all the medical, interventions that might be needed.
So you have your midwife, or the midwife that's assigned to you the day you get there.
Yeah, so you get the midwife that you haven't met previously when you come into the birth clinic. We're pretty hard here. So you a lot of women come in and they're not in active labor yet. So then they are sent home again to work with the latent phase at home, which is different from the United States, from what I've understood.
Yeah.
So you might go back and forth a couple of times, which is, as the midwife, we know that's not very good for the process because it's stressful. So we try to educate the women beforehand why we think it's such a good idea to stay at home until you have regular contractions. So when they are accepted to the hospital, they meet the midwife, and the midwife has an assistant that she works together with. And if everything is normal during the process, she will not meet the doctor ever. She will only be attended by the midwife.
I know that you have this very special podcast that you have been launching. Will you tell us about your podcast and what you've been learning about the difference in birth? Because this is just fascinating what you're doing.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, there are so many horror stories going around in Sweden and other places around birth that I decided to make a podcast in English to have more women be able to listen to it, about positive birth. So it's a very narrow podcast, and it's only about positive birth stories. And it doesn't have to be, that everything is rosy and happy and a pink cloud. It can be with complications too, but the feeling that the woman has after giving birth is positive and empowering. That's part of what I do also. And I do in Sweden, I also do a really big podcast in Swedish about pregnancy and childbirth. But in that podcast, we cover all topics, so not only the positive births.
And what are the names of your two podcasts?
So the English one is the Positive Birth Story podcast, and the Swedish one is Gravidpodden, which is equivalent to the pregnancy podcast.
Very cool. Very cool. That's so exciting. So tell us what you've been learning about the difference between births in the US versus births in Sweden.
Oh, yeah. What I've been learning is that it seems like you really have to fight in the US to get the birth that you want, especially if you give birth in a hospital. And it seems like it's more routine to have a lot of interventions than to not have interventions if you actually give birth in a hospital, from the stories that I've heard.
Welcome to the Midwifery Wisdom Collective, a community for midwives. Whether you're a seasoned midwife, just starting midwifery school, or in between, we have something for you. On our website, midwiferywisdom.com, you can find sources of all things support, community, and education. Our collective offers a podcast hosted by 4 incredible midwives covering a variety of topics, online courses that range from hands-on skills such as fetal heart tone monitoring to business marketing skills and more. And we have a blog and YouTube channel that highlight a variety of educational and self-care topics. We also have different consulting options if you need more individualized help with legal advice, business, branding, and of course, the art and science of midwifery. We believe that midwifery is about relationships, both between a midwife and client, and especially between midwives themselves. And that's why we hold an annual conference and live hands-on skills sessions across the country so that you can connect with other midwives and further hone your skills at the same time. Please come follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, or wherever you get your social news. At the Midwifery Wisdom Collective, we believe your self-care is just as important as the care you give to your clients. We commit to adding to your well-being as well as your professional development. Take care of yourselves as we need you. Welcome home, midwives. Now we go back to Erika, and I asked her what she felt like she had to offer the international community.
I think what you're doing now is to trying to get all the midwives, you know, like it's the same profession, and it's we're doing the same thing, but it's not being so united as worldwide. I think this is a really, really good idea. And
Thank
I
you.
think to exchange, you know, ideas and this is how we do it in this country, this is what we're doing over here, and so forth, is very, very important. I don't know if I have anything especially that I have to offer. I think the offer is, I think what you're doing is that we all get together and talk about it, you know.
It is so fun, isn't it?
Yeah. And midwives are very good at talking.
Aren't we though?
They love to talk. Yeah, they do.
So what are you really, really good at? What's your thing in midwifery?
I'm very, very good at, I think, making people or women or the family, because here in Sweden the dads always come, or we encourage the dads always to come to even the maternity clinic checkups. So usually what they do is that they come along, and I think I'm good at making them feel welcome and at ease, and to be ready to speak about fears and anxieties, or even just, you know, having a sort of one-on-one, not nursing, one-on-one, I can't find the English word for it now, but just to connect with people and to see their needs. I'm good at seeing somebody's needs. That's what I'm good at.
That's beautiful. So there's this midwifery phenomenon, and in English we call it holding space. Does that make sense to you?
Holding space? I don't know.
You
what
don't
that
know
means.
that phrase?
No.
Well, it's a phrase that's used to describe kind of the deep underwork of midwifery.
Yeah.
Like what you're saying, like you can see what someone's needs are.
Yeah.
In the birth space.
Very good word. Holding space. Yeah.
In the birth space, or even just during a clinic prenatal visit, when they come in, the reason that they feel comfortable is because of this phenomenon where you can create space for their emotions and for their questions, and they feel safe. Do you know that feeling?
Yeah, I do. I absolutely. It's a very good phrase, actually. And I think it's very, very true. I think that midwives do become experts on this. And I can tell you, like, it's applied in every walk of life. I'm noticed that I'm quite good at it, you know, even if I'm not doing my midwifery. But it's very true. And I think midwives are very capable of that. And I don't know the reason for it, because when I did my nursing, and especially that, I don't feel that is the case. I think that it's very true to midwives, especially.
I agree. And in fact, I would go one step further and say the profession that probably aligns most closely with midwifery in terms of this spiritual, psychological aspect of holding space is being a priest or a minister.
I agree. Yes, God, that is very good. Yes. Yeah. I agree. Like something spiritual and something almost like there can be a stillness in it, but also a deep sort of trust, and even, you know, it's very, very true. It's very connected to anything where you give guidance, I think. You're right. I think it's very particular to just midwives. I don't see it with other colleagues who do the same. I think it's very true to midwifery, and I think it's a necessity. I think this is to be a good midwife. This is a necessity, and I think you learn it. It doesn't happen straight away. I think it happens as you go along. And
so my question for all midwives around the world is, how do you teach this?
I think, oh God, that is a difficult question, because it's almost like an art form. So I think it's hard. I don't know. Because a talent is something different. You know, if you have a talent of being good at speaking to people, I think midwives develop this talent to have this trust between the birthing mother and the midwife. I think it's learning by what do you say? Teaching by learning. I think it's to do with the fact that you see it in other midwives, because in Sweden you do have, even when your first year of training, you have like a mentor who is more experienced than the newly qualified midwives. And if you have a good mentor, which everyone has, then you probably pick up on this. And I think humans are quite good at learning by just seeing how other people are acting, you know, towards, yeah.
It's a whole culture of midwifery, right?
Yeah. It is sorry, what did you say? It's a culture of?
A culture of midwifery. Like, it's a common part of the culture, is this quiet, powerful way of holding space.
Yeah, and I really like that phrase. I'm gonna talk to my colleagues about it, and I'm gonna ask them what they think, because I think you're very right, and I think that it takes a certain. I think you can learn it, and I wouldn't say it's a talent. I think it's something like spirituality that you pick up on, where you realize that to be sort of like what I called an accident and emergency nurse. Do you know the type where it's quite sort of it's a different environment to work in an A&E department than it is in a labor ward, for instance. And you have a certain type of nurses which are probably necessary there. You don't have at the labor ward, because that wouldn't give you anything, but you know, it wouldn't give you that environment for the mother to feel safe in. I think you realize that the holding space is something that is necessary, you know, in order to make the woman, because I don't think there's a midwife on the planet that finds her job uninteresting, or, you know, when you're there, you know, like especially on the labor ward, that you have to be very much like with the mother and the partner in the moment with the person or with the people, you know, who's the family. You have to be very much there to you can't be somewhere else in your thoughts or in your, and I think that midwifery are very good at that. Once you step into the birthing room, I think that magic happens, is that the midwife is very aware of that. I have to be here with them in every thought, you know. So I think they're very good at it. And and holding space, I like that.
Good. So tell us your wildest, most extreme or crazy moment in midwifery.
Oh, I don't know. I think it was when I did my, and I find it very, I always tell this, when I did my midwifery training, I had a mentor that was very, very experienced. She was one of those midwives that, you know, you just looked up to and what have you. And she had, I don't know, a baby that was big, and it was a vaginal birth. And the baby got stuck. The shoulder, how do you call it in English? The shoulders.
Shoulder dystocia. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so shoulder dystocia. But the mother was very determined, and the midwife, who was very experienced, she really just helped this mother to really push, and she managed to release the shoulders. The baby weighed 5.6 kilos, nearly 6 kilos.
Wow.
And she did it all on her own. She didn't call a doctor in. She was working with the mother very, very closely, like very closely. And they had that magical, partnership, the mother and the midwife. And I was like a midwife, a student, standing just in awe, with this. I wouldn't say that perhaps is my wildest moment, but it was certainly one of my most sort of, oh my God, she is really the best person in this room, this midwife who delivered this nearly 6 kilo baby and released the shoulders.
Do you know how long it took?
About 20 minutes, I think.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And she had me pushing and, on abdomen, and she was telling me exactly what to do. And, it was just completely beautiful. And she did it. And actually there was a doctor coming in, and an obstetrician who was quite young, and the midwife who's delivering this baby, she just asked the doctor to take a step back. She just said, I need you to not say anything, just stand in the corner, or just go out. She did it, and it was completely amazing. And I thought, okay, I want to be like that.
And both mom and baby were okay?
Yeah, fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's such a long time. They say that there's 4 minutes from shoulder dysplasia for the potential for brain damage. So
no, I know, but this was like 20 minutes after she'd found out, like, the baby, not to take the baby out, but it was, once she was starting, I don't remember exactly, but it was when the baby was pushing. But that was one of those really aha moments for me, that it was completely, she was so skilled and so wonderful at this. So that really set the mark for me, where, okay, midwives are a profession in their own rights,
Yeah. And experts in their own right.
Yeah, an expert in their own right. And that's actually how they see it here. I don't know anyone who hasn't got the utmost respect for midwives here in Sweden. It's quite sort of a profession that people look up to. I'm very proud of it, and very much, the pay isn't brilliant, but, nor is nursing, but, at least it's a very respected profession. I don't say I've never heard anyone who consider it as a second class, like you expressed it. I don't, what did you say? Second class citizen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
like
how midwives are treated in many parts in the world.
Yeah. It's not like that here. And of course, if you go to developing countries, and so forth, it's I can imagine, but it's very, I think it's a profession where here most people find it completely, they are almost a bit humble, and everyone, of course, when you go to parties, want to tell their labor stories when you tell them you're midwife. Yeah, which I don't mind. I enjoy that, actually.
Yeah. Wonderful.
No, but it's it's one of those, but I was quite unprepared, because I probably have more amazing birth stories, but that was the first one that came out. So
I love it. I really love it, because it is one of those really real moments, and this witnessing this preceptor who is even more skilled than the young doctor is really indicative of what's happening. Yeah.
She just told him, "Can you stand outside?" And he did it. He wouldn't dare to come near her.
Because he also respects the midwife.
Very much. Here they have, like, it's supposed to be it is a multidisciplinary team, like where you work together, you give reports together, you know, where you are talking about, oh, I have this first time go in room 1 or, you know, whatnot. And so they do, but it's a different, it's very, I think it's very, even for the young doctors or obstetricians, they're very sort of respected, really, the midwives here, which I enjoy. But it was a long time ago I worked in the labor ward. I have to add that, you know, my speciality now is also, like, on the maternity wards here in Sweden, we also look after the young woman, where we give advice about contraceptives and so forth, and I enjoy that work too. And also the menopause woman can come to the maternity clinic, you know, it's called midwifery clinics here in Sweden. And we also take pap smears on everyone up to 67 years old every 3 years. And they are also, it's a free screening in this country. And like I said, contraceptives are free for everyone under 23. So even if you're like a young woman wanting to have, we are trying to promote intrauterine devices for young women to have long-term contraceptives. So we do that too at our clinics. We do the intrauterine devices as well. And they are also free, which is, so we're trying to make people have, you know, long-term contraceptives.
This episode's research is from Ola Andersson. He's a doctor and PhD, and he is currently the attending in neonatology at Skåne University Hospital in Sweden. Dr. Andersson is a part of the European Society for Pediatric Research. His research has focused on maternal and child health, and most recently, he has been doing research in Sweden and Nepal on delayed cord clamping. His newest research is on delayed cord clamping and the effect during resuscitation.
My name is Ola Andersson, and I'm a neonatologist. I work in South Sweden at the University Hospital of Lund and Malmö. I have been doing research on cord clamping for about 12 years now. Well, that's, I suppose, what I can tell.
And what made you interested in that subject?
Oh, it's it's actually that my former wife, she's a midwife, and there was a sort of surveillance of the fetal heart. There was a new invention in Sweden in the 1990s. They tried to test it in the hospitals, and then they wanted to do immediate cord clamping in the hospitals. And that was also the case in the hospital where I was working at that time. So she came home telling me, and I was a pediatrician at that time, telling me about how crazy it was that they were supposed now to do immediate cord clamping. And I, as at that time, most of my colleagues in the pediatric and neonatology department, we were not aware about that there would be a sort of question about when to clamp the cord. But I started to read into the subject, and of course also thought that, well, is this really the best thing to do? And well, one thing led to another, and when trying to ask and discuss the clamping time with obstetricians or colleagues, everybody were referring to very old and not very good research. So I decided to try to find out more about the time of clamping and what effect it has. So then we started a randomized controlled trial here in Sweden in 2008. And from there on, you might say,
That is fantastic. I love that story. So tell us the results of that study, and also how you started working in Nepal.
Yeah, so that study, I think it's it really got a lot of attention when it was published in 2011. There was a piece of it in New York Times, and The Economist even wrote about it, because we showed that the iron deficiency in the newborns at 4 months of age, it was reduced with 90%, almost gone at all. And this was when we compared the immediate cord clamping with 3 minutes. And then we did a follow-up where we studied these children at 4 years of age. This was 400 babies that we then follow up at 4 years of age, and we could show that the babies that had delayed cord clamping after 3 minutes, they had better fine motor function, and in at least a small sense also there was signs of improved social behavior. And this was we had this published in JAMA Pediatrics, and if you read the ACOG recommendations you will see that they changed from immediate to 30 to 60 seconds, referring to this trial. So that's one of my, I would say, the accomplishments that I'm mostly proud of, is that we actually had the ACOG at least put the cord clamping time a little bit later than they did before. I got in contact with a professor in the University of Uppsala, who was involved in research in the Helping Babies Breathe program in Kathmandu. And they were finishing this study, and there was a research team on place that they were looking for new research to perform, because they have a lot of trained nurses and doctors that were ready to do more research. And then I was asked if I was interested in doing cord clamping trials down there. And then we first performed almost like a parallel study to the Swedish study, where we could looked at there they had at that time they clamped the cord just before 1 minute at this hospital in Nepal, and then we compared it with after 3 minutes. We could show that iron deficiency was reduced by a little bit more than 40% at 8 months, and I was really interested in being able to show that the anemia was reduced by 9% still at 12 months of age. And then it was comparing before 1 minute and after 3 minutes. So there is, from our research, we tried to show that there is actually a benefit in waiting more than 1 minute.
Wow.
Yeah.
How exciting. And so when was that published?
That was published also in JAMA Pediatrics in 2017. Both of these, all of these studies, we have of course checked bilirubin and jaundice, and we haven't seen any differences. We haven't seen any higher risks of jaundice or need of phototherapy either in Sweden or in Nepal when trying to look at that.
And of course, that used to be the reason for early cord clamping, was this idea that we would have all these jaundiced babies, and you've since disproved that.
Well, that's one reason we really, because of course, when you're doing studies, you just don't want to look for the good things that could happen, but also the risks of your research. You look at the Cochrane review done on term children and cord clamping. That's what they did show as a risk, is that there is a higher rate of phototherapy in the delayed cord clamping group, and this Cochrane report has been criticized among others by Judith Mercer, who is a very known midwife in the cord clamping research area, that they that they didn't take bilirubin. They didn't assess bilirubin in all these studies. So they were just looking at the baby and deciding which babies needed phototherapy. So when you look at all the, what I can see from all studies that are actually measuring bilirubin, none of the studies has shown any difference between early and delayed cord clamping. So that's, of course, as you say, it's one of the reasons why people still are hesitant in performing it. And it's all about an old, quite bad study that are still living in this literature, and very important to try to find data that either talks against it or for it.
Indeed. Well, would you just, I know maybe you don't want to go on the record, so you can say no if you want, but I was wondering if you would draw implications or conclusions from your research, maybe even recommendations for care.
So this new study on resuscitation, it was really, it's been, of course, in our minds for a lot of years now, that the babies that has asphyxia, or at least has problems starting breathing, they might be the ones that among term infants that would be gaining mostly from not clamping the cord. So that's what we really wanted to find out in Nepal. And we had very long preparations. I think it took almost 2 years for us to prepare before the study, training and planning. And then when we performed the study, still, even when we did all this planning and all this training, there was a very high rate of people or persons not following the protocol. So among the babies that were supposed to be, about half of them were actually early clamped. And that's a large methodological, there is a large error in the method there, which also makes this paper, it's more like a positive sign for more research than drawing large conclusions. In all humbleness, that's really important to say. And I would say if we didn't have this high attrition rate, we would publish in a more, even more known journal. But I think that's one of the reasons that the journals with higher impact score were not accepting this study, and it's true. There is this large problem. So I would say that this encourage people. This study should encourage people to do more studies. That's absolutely and we didn't see any risks or any drawbacks in doing resuscitation in the bed of the mother. So it will help all of us who wants to learn more to do more studies, but I couldn't give any recommendations, but it gives me hope that this might absolutely help babies all around the world in the future.
How exciting.
Right. Yeah.
How exciting. Well, thank you again so much for being willing to speak with me on the record.
Yeah, I had this really interesting birth. It was she was really young. She was 16 years old. And she came in via the ER because she had stomach pain. And she'd been playing soccer that day, a soccer game. She was pretty skilled with soccer. So it was a high-level soccer game for a 16-year-old girl. And she had to leave the soccer game and came into the ER with pain in her stomach, and they pretty rapidly realized that she was pregnant. And when she came up to the delivery ward where I worked, you could hardly tell. You know, she was a little bit chubby. She was 16, and she wore sweatpants and a big sweater. I think she kind of knew that she was pregnant, but had suppressed it. But she hadn't told her mom. It was a beautiful birth to experience, because first she had this she had this conflict with the mother. He became really, really furious with her that she hadn't told her about the pregnancy. And the more hours she worked with contractions, the more she let out the stomach. So after like 3 hours with contractions, she was fully pregnant. It was like she held the baby towards the spine because she didn't want it to show the pregnancy. And the more she relaxed and the more her mother kind of accepted that, okay, this is what it is. She's pregnant and she's having a baby right now. The more she let the whole pregnancy come out. There was something so beautiful with it. And it was like, was this whole process of, the secret and the mother and the daughter and the guilt and then in the room during the birth, the acceptance and the love. And how we can, with willpower, kind of hide. I haven't seen that before. Hide a pregnancy just by tucking in the muscles in the stomach.
Well, and it's also, I have. It's almost energetic,
Yeah.
It's like her energy is held in until she accepts it. Yeah, I've helped a number of teen moms. I used to work for an actual, in the US, they used to call them homes for unwed mothers, very, very old thought process. But I used to work for one in Charleston, South Carolina. And we frequently got girls who arrived 9 months pregnant because that's when the first person noticed, because they were able to hold it in all the way. And I actually was called to a birth at the hospital with a woman who was also 16 or 17 and had come in with stomach pains and didn't know she was pregnant. And so they called us in to support them in this process. And oh my gosh, the shock, the awe, and the power. It's so fascinating. I think most, at least in America, I don't know what you think where you are, but in America, I think that we have been so conditioned to believe that birth is painful. That if you have never taken in that messaging, it's actually not that painful. It's almost like a learned process.
Yeah, that's what we're taught. It's super painful.
Yeah,
and if you don't know anything, you don't expect anything. Yeah, that's
exactly.
True for
So
anything,
she came to the hospital and she had stomach pain, but she thought it was stomach pain. She thought I have diarrhea or I have intestinal pain. So it never was that bad. And then she had a baby. And afterwards she was like, I can't believe how much that was okay. Like that wasn't like I thought it would be, because she never took it on that that's what it was until right at the end. And then she pushed out a baby,
I know, it's so cool, but it's like that is the thing with birth. It's so much a mind over matter. Exactly.
Or even a habituation, right? So if we're habituated to this idea that it's going to be the worst pain you ever felt and it will be unbearable, then of course it's kind of unbearable. But if instead you think, oh, this is just like stomach pains, then it's not that bad. It's funny what the mind does with it, right? It's so interesting. Well, so did she make a lot of noise in labor? Did she do okay? And how did she welcome the baby? Tell us the rest of the story.
I can't remember her making a lot of noise. By the end, she made some noise, but just, the moaning more. And she got a little girl and she was just so happy when she arrived. I was a little bit afraid that it would be hard for her to connect with the baby, but she was just overjoyed.
Wow.
And her mother too. So it was beautiful to be part of that journey from the secret to the conflict to the power to the joy.
Wow, that is so beautiful. I love that.
We don't have that many teen pregnancies in Sweden, so that's why I remember it.
So why is that, do you think?
We have a really good system about contraceptives, but also we have a high abortion rate too. It's an abortion-friendly country, which I'm very proud of.
That it's free, that anyone can access it.
Yeah, you can access it, and you can do it easily.
Do you have to have parental choice, or?
No.
No.
And
so
you
anyone
can do it without your parents knowing. But also we have good sexual education in school, and it's we have clinics for young women and young boys where they can go without telling their parents, and it's free of charge, so it's easy accessible to get contraceptives and get knowledge about how to not become pregnant and what to do if you become pregnant.
Brilliant. And so you've been traveling in the US some and interviewing women, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about that trip.
Oh, that was so exciting. I went to camp for adults last year in August, upstate New York, the Good Life Project camp. What was it about? It was a lovely camp. It was about sustainable entrepreneurship. And there I met so many interesting women. And when I said I was a midwife, they all told me about their births, of course. And so many women had such positive experiences. And then I asked them, like, you got to tell this story to everyone. It's such an amazing story. And all of them said, no, I hardly ever speak about it. Because I don't want to offend the women that hasn't had good stories. And I just felt that was so sad. What happens to all the good stories? Because as a midwife, I know that there are more good stories than bad stories, at least in Sweden. I'm not sure that's the case in the US if you look upon the statistics for your country, but in Sweden that's the case. So I just, and then I hooked up with some women and I decided that I had to come back and record them live in the States.
What an amazing journey.
Yeah. I took my equipment in this bag and I traveled to the US, and it's, life is what you make it.
Oh, I agree entirely. I'm doing the same thing. I'm traveling internationally partly because I really want to get these live recordings, because it sounds so amazing to hear folks in their own environment talk about their experience.
Oh, yeah, it's true. And it's also like for now we're doing this via a Zoom call. It's something happens when you are sitting opposite to another person. It's something with the chemistry. And for me, I felt it was so important because it's so sacred and personal to tell someone that you don't know your birth story.
Yeah, it's very intimate. Yeah,
it's super intimate. And I find that the stories are, what do you say, more true? What would you say?
Authentic.
Yeah, authentic.
Yeah.
When we meet in person. So it was a great trip.
That's so amazing. So what brought you to maternal child health? Why are you a midwife?
To become a midwife in Sweden, I don't think it's the same in the States, but it might be. But you need to be a nurse first, and you have to work as a nurse for at least a year or two before you can go into midwifery college. But I knew from the start that was what I wanted to become. I've had a fascination around birth ever since I was a young girl. That just grew stronger on me. So I choose between becoming a midwife and a lawyer. So I came into both education sides. So much to my stepfather's disappointment, who is a lawyer, but I've always been very happy about my career choice. Or it's actually more, isn't it more a lifestyle to be a midwife than a career choice? It's a way of life, I think.
That's a great way to say it. I agree. It's not so much a job you can leave at home. No. It's always with you.
Yeah. So I never say I work as a midwife. I always say I am a midwife, because that's what I am.
I love that. That's so true. In the US we say it's a calling.
It's a calling. Yeah.
Like you get called to it. You don't choose it.
Yeah. I agree upon that too, but if we say that in Sweden, that's part of why we're so poorly paid as women, because it's a calling. It's a calling, and then if it's a calling, you don't have to, pay us as much as we're worth. So
yeah, I agree. That's a very important distinction. Let's also be paid what we're worth.
I try to avoid that. So it's calling, but it's also a very responsible job.
What have you learned in these many years of midwifery that you wish was common knowledge the world over? What do you know now that you wish everyone knew?
That the fewer interventions we do that's not called upon because of medical reasons, the safer it is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we got to do the right interventions and the right checkups, but we got to quit doing all those other interventions and checkups that just make everything confusing, because it's for most women, it's a healthy, normal, safe process if you are guided by a skilled midwife. So, and as a midwife, I think it's also the beginner's phase. It's hard to really trust the process, I think, but the more years I worked, the less interventions I did. So by the end, I hardly did any interventions. I
agree.
Out.
Yeah. Look, it just happens every time, over and over.
Yeah,
It just works.
Just trust it, trust the woman, trust the process, and keep your hands away.
Birth work.
Most situations, and also, of course, as a midwife, you always have to have that risk scenario. What if this happens and this happens, and I do this and I do this and I do that? So you always have to be on your toes, of course, and know what to do. But wait it out.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I talk about finding the balance. Right?
Yeah. What I've learned is that have more midwives all over the place. I think, actually, it's not only I that think that, it's also research that show that it's safer for the mother and the baby and the pregnancy. So.
Yeah, the World Health Organization is using 2020 as the year of the midwife, and they're helping to share these details that it actually is safer for most women to have midwifery care. And we need so many more midwives. It's crazy how many more midwives we need in order to meet this goal.
Midwives to help women with low risk pregnancies and really help them safely throughout pregnancy and birth. We know our shit.
Yeah, we do. There we go. I'm quoting you on that one. Okay. That's great. This is obvious, but will you say it just for our listeners? Mm-hmm. Why does the world need more midwives?
Oh, because we are experts on low risk pregnancy and birth, which makes it really safe for the woman and the baby throughout pregnancy and birth. That's how we are trained, and that's our special skill. Yeah, it's safer. It's safer to look upon it as a normal and healthy process than to do so many checkups and an ultra scan every time and whatever.